On this week's episode of Uncomfortable Conversations,
I want to talk to you.
Not now, later.
No, now.
we speak to mental health professionals about the epidemic.
Don't talk to me about a land of the free and the home of the brave until everybody's free.
This week's host is Nick Bridwell, and this is Uncomfortable Conversations.
Well, for Pete's sake, say yes or no.
Hi, I'm Nick Bridwell, and I'm the host of Uncomfortable Conversations. Today, I'm excited because we're going to be speaking with Dr. Jaya Mathew, and she has some awesome just tips for us and information about how to endure the quarantine, some great mental health tips, and things to look for not to do. So a little bit about Dr. Mathew. She's a licensed psychologist and founder of a group practice called Wellness 360 in Dallas. She holds a PhD in counseling psychology and a master's in social work. After practicing psychotherapy for over a decade, she's come to believe that a holistic approach, which engages both the mind and the body, is optimal for healing. She believes that all of us are capable of learning how to live well in our bodies and experience the joys of connected living. And she works with patients in treating depression, anxiety, relationship conflicts, trauma, abuse, and negative self-image. Her specialties include working with couples and women's issues, and she has a special interest in working with persons of diverse backgrounds. And so after working extensively as a diversity trainer and facilitating anti-oppression workshops for the past decade, she's developed a unique appreciation for the challenges faced by those groups. So after that, awesome introduction, I know that you guys are excited to meet Dr. Mathew. Hi.
Hi, thank you for my very long-winded bio. I appreciate it.
Well, it's nice to get to know people a little bit before we dig into these. That way they kind of know the perspective of where you're coming from. And I know that right now, a big issue that's kind of going on across the world, across this nation, particularly as we endure more cases of COVID, is how do you work on your mental health when you're in quarantine? Because in a way, our entire world has changed. So I think the first question that we would have for you is, with hundreds of millions of people across the planet under quarantine, what are some of the most common psychological occurrences that might happen when people are in lockdown?
Yeah, so I think as we would expect, right? Depression and anxiety are at an all-time high for people. We're seeing increased rates. It's very common. I think long-term, we're actually going to see PTSD. My team and I were already starting to see some of that, especially with frontline healthcare workers. And those pieces, difficulty sleeping. I mean, the insomnia, and people, I think, are even starting to just report having like vivid dreams. And those pieces, that's very common. For a variety of reasons. We have anxiety. We don't know what's happening. Our lives have changed. So those are kind of the clinical irritability. I think people are also often reporting more anger, even if they weren't like an angry person. They're like, why am I so irritated? Well, because your life has turned upside down and you're getting mixed messages all the time about how safe are you? What should we do? Things are changing. So all of that makes it even more challenging because there's not this set path. Another piece that I think that might be helpful for people to think about is that the world, we're going through something that I think it's David Kessler. He's like this huge researcher with grief. And what he described was just so apt. It's like this weird feeling that we're feeling, like even if we're not totally depressed or completely anxious that we're aware of it, we just feel off. It's collective grief. It's this sense of foreboding that's happening and we don't know when it's going to end. So it's kind of this, they term it like anticipatory grief, because you're anticipating something, but we don't even know what it is. So the brain just knows there's a threat and it's signaling to us, and the world looks different depending on what state people are in. I know earlier when everything was in lockdown, you drive around and it's eerie, right? Restaurants are closed, everyone's wearing masks, and you just feel unsettled. And that feeling, that's collective grief, along with all the things that have had to be canceled that are not going to be replicated. Graduations, weddings, numerous things, even hard things like not being able to attend loved ones' funerals. So all of that puts the world in this kind of stage of suffering and grief, and having language around it. What we hope is that that helps, so that we know. And I think it goes in waves. I don't know how have things been for you? Initially, sometimes people reported not being aware of it, because we were kind of in this, like, the brain gets really alarmed and we're in this planning mode. So like we saw people going out and buying tons of toilet paper. It gave the brain something to do. It was like action oriented. Now the toilet paper crisis is over, and we're moving from that to almost like this grief or quarantine fatigue. How's it been for you? How have you experienced that quarantine?
So I think it was interesting for me to hear you talk about some of these common things, because people need to understand that you're not alone in feeling a lot of this. I've definitely felt some of these things, the anxieties, of the ghost town when you go around and it's just like not what you're used to. I felt anxiety of being isolated, and then maybe being around people and not knowing what to do, because I've been quarantined for 4 months. I've been working from home. So it's walking the dog and somebody's kind of headed your way, and you kind of feel a little squeamish because you're not used to talking to people for a while.
Right.
And that kind of anxiety and just the foreboding, like you talked about, not really knowing the future, definitely had some anxiety there. So I can see how that's a common occurrence. And I hope for people watching that that you're not alone, that this is something that a lot of people are feeling right now.
Yeah, it's hard. There's I don't think any of us can be immune to the impact of this in some way. Our lives have changed, and it's unexpected, and it's unprecedented for our lifetime, for us to have to go through something like this, at least in the US, as far as I know.
Yeah, it's very interesting seeing the different approaches to it, a lot of independent minds of trying to go through life, and a lot of people are being more cautionary. I tend to be a little bit more cautionary, so I've been staying at home, wearing the mask when I'm out, and you see just a lot of how the anxiety of that situation plays out. So there's that conflict as well, of two opposing views of what's going on. And what you said earlier about how in the beginning you have something to do, you have a mission, and that's to kind of get yourself ready to change a little bit, work from home, be stocked up. And now that that's simmered out and we're all kind of getting used to it, then you wonder what's next. And that's the kind of the scary part.
Yeah, it is. And that's when it's like the brain just gets very irritable, because there's not stimulus, right? Things are getting the same over and over again. We don't have a routine, but we're in the same environment all the time.
That's so true. So what are some ways that we can try to stay mentally healthy while we're under quarantine?
Yeah, so my favorite thing has always been getting connected with nature. So even in our practice, we have an ecotherapy garden space, and this is pre-pandemic. Little did I know how useful this will be in those ways. And it's because getting connected to nature in any way is grounding. So there's like this perspective that when we go back and into nature, even if you're just standing outside for a second, that you get this concept of like restoration, coming back to baseline and where we're at. And so research has found, and it backs us up in this, that even for like when people are going into hospitals and before they have surgery, they tend to have better outcomes if they have scenic nature images versus not. So much less us going outside. And nature captures us. It's expansive. Like if you stand outside, even if you're like, oh, I hate the bugs, I hate this, it grabs your attention. And it grabs your attention in a way that allows you to be really fully present, even if you're noticing the bugs. You're out there, you're in nature, and it can be consuming. And that gives the brain some rest. So what I've been recommending, and our team has been recommending to patients, is can you get outside for at least 20 minutes? We now, I think a lot of ancient healers have known this. People have known this, right? But we have actually hard science that tells us if you spend 20 minutes outside, and you don't have to even be active, just being outside and engaged. So not outside and on your phone, not outside and listening to a podcast, but being outside and present, you have lower levels of cortisol. They've done testing, and it's 20 minutes is that marker to get that kind of physiological benefit. But we know even 10 minutes, your blood pressure lowers. Your parasympathetic nervous system and that's the good part of your nervous system. That's not your fight or flight. That's the, let me soothe you, let me calm you down, gets activated. So I think being outside is become vital. I've never seen in my neighborhood so many people outside walking ever. I mean, we have a family-friendly neighborhood and all those things, but just to the point, like it's like the sidewalks were crowded because that's what people can do. There's an innate healing and propensity, I think, if we let ourselves to move towards what actually works for us, if we can listen to that part. So I think that nature is one of my big things. I've been prescribing the nature pill to people left and right, and it works. It gives you that kind of sense. Exercise, obviously, right? We know this, but I think people who love to work out, they're like, yes, of course, I'm going to keep working out. But not everyone loves to work out. I'm so on that. But
same here.
Right. It's not like my favorite. I do it because I want the cardiovascular health, but it's not my like go-to. This is going to I'm going to just run towards running, maybe run a little away from running. However, what I like to tell people that like to work out or not, is that you don't have to go outside and have just like this very hard workout or even indoors. You just need moderate exercise. And if you are getting your body moving, even just moderately, you're setting off those feel-good hormones and endorphins and those things that let you feel more calm. And we also feel more productive. The brain likes tasks. And even if you're like someone that hates structure and hates tasks, the brain, I will tell you, likes to have completed something. And so if you work out and you do 10 minutes, and that's all you do, you're still doing something really great for your body, and you're shifting the blood flow. There's even some research out there that I like to tell people is that if you're anxious or you're depressed, that's usually some rigid thinking. It's like, right, you have these thoughts that are kind of crowding your brain, and they're a bit loud, and it goes in the same kind of pathway. That neuroplasticity is this way. If you exercise or you're out in nature, that loosens up that neuroplasticity because it's sending good blood flow. And so the theories is that it helps you grow more neurons. And so I think that's something that's helpful to do. Those are my two favorites. I have other pieces that I've been telling everyone. I just don't know how long you want me to go.
Yeah, that's great to learn more. What I find really fascinating is some of these tips that you're giving, they kind of transcend any sort of culture or anything. I think about an article I read, and I wish I remembered the word, but in Japan, they have a certain word for therapy where they will just go out and sit among the trees. Yes. And I forgot what that word is. We'll put it in the video later when we look it up and run it across the screen.
Yeah, I would love to know too.
Yeah, but I love that's something that is noticed across different cultures and maybe different, I think it's more of like a spiritual practice than even a psychological practice, but you have these things that are instilled in different places for a reason because they work.
Right, we gravitate towards what works across cultures, across where we live. There's something that feels better for our bodies, and therefore everyone starts doing it. So we may call it in the US ecotherapy now, but ancient whatever they call it in Japan. And people have been doing this for years, right? Way before our time. The other piece that I think that comes through is flow to keep in mind. So the brain likes flow. And one of these predictors of well-being is actually flow. And I saw somewhere, and I'm sorry, I can't remember off the top of my head, but they did this like massive study post pandemic, which is still not post, but in China. And what the predictor was of people being more well was flow. It wasn't that whether they're like not depressed or anxious or being content. Flow is when you get to this sweet spot and you're engaged in something like, I think one article I saw, it was in the New York Times, they were talking about either painting or if you're playing basketball and it's rhythmic and you're in this flow and you're consumed, your brain is totally engaged on the present task and you're in a flow. So now a lot of people in quarantine, your whole house is living together. You have kids that are not at school anymore. I will tell you myself, the flow has been harder to find. And so, but then we also see that all these people have been trying to like garden and like make bread. I think that what the article was saying, and it just spoke to me because I've known about flow for years, but I was like, oh, that's what that is. People are gravitating to try to find something that gives them flow. So for coping, yes, do the exercise. Do those pieces of being in nature. Also, try to find something where you can be uninterrupted and actually engage and get into some sort of flow. Your mood will lift, or you'll feel just a more like, even if it's not this, oh my God, I'm so happy because I'm still in quarantine, you might just feel more evenness and a more sense of well-being. So that's one of the things. Also with anxiety thoughts, I think that would be important to talk about is going, so all of us, right? We have, whether we run anxious, whether we run depressed or not, a pandemic breeds anxiety. We are absorbing it consciously or unconsciously. And for some people, it gets very loud. And so I always like to say anxiety and depression, they're big liars. They're super big liars. But if a big liar is going to come over to your house, are you going to ignore someone that comes to your house, and are you going to open the door, let them in, and are you going to totally ignore them, or are you going to greet that person because they came into your house? We're going to greet them, right?
Right.
You can't totally ignore them. It'd be nice, but they came into your house, they're at the door, they may not be your favorite person, but social norms indicate that we should at least give them a nod. So I like to tell people, greet your guests. They may be lying to you. They may not be your friend, but you must greet them and give them their due. So there's common sayings like name it to tame it. If you resist, it will persist. So it's the same thing with these thoughts of anxiety or anything that's boggling down in your mind. I think as human beings, a lot of us, if we feel uncomfortable, if something is hot, we run away. Why would we touch something that's on fire? That seems stupid. Our brain tells us, run. But actually, we really have to actually touch it. And you don't have to stay in it. You don't have to keep burning your hand, but a little bit of touching it and acknowledging it. Acknowledge that guest and say, hi, I see you. And yeah, I'm having that thought. Talk with someone with it, a therapist, a friend that can hold that for you and not add to it. Write it down, put it somewhere, and then it might come back up. Greet it again. You don't have to entertain it all day long, but you have to be polite. So I say, hi, anxiety. Hi, depression. I see you. Yes, I am worried about X, Y, and Z. I say it out loud, and sometimes I probably seem very bizarre because I will actually say it out loud to myself. And I'll say, I am worried about X, Y, and Z. But there's nothing I can do about it right now. So now I'm going to re-engage and try to get in some flow. And it's going to circle back. I'll engage it again, and then I redirect. But if we try to push it out the door, it's going to come back like a tidal wave or store in our bodies. So
what's a good time to engage that anxiety? Is it just kind of like delay it until it is gone, or is there a way to be healthy when addressing it when it comes time?
Yeah, so I think that it depends on somewhat. So let's say it's light anxiety. So I'm going to go with that because, right, it depends on the person. It depends if they have what kind of actual, if they had OCD, if they have but let's say that this is someone that has become anxious just from the pandemic. Maybe they've always run a little bit worried, but they don't have maybe where it interferes with their life. And so I would unpack it. So you would want to unpack it. It comes into the door. I'd want to entertain my guest of anxiety and say, what is it that I'm worried about? Okay. Now, what can I know for certain about this? What can I do about it? What can I not do about it? And then I put that all together and say, this is what I'm really worried about. It is unknown. What I can do is wash my hands and maintain my mask or socially distance. That's what I can control. Now, I'm still worried and I'm going to have to tolerate that distress. If you're working with a therapist, we finagle that a little bit more depending on what your unique concerns are and talk you through it. We also see where you're storing that in your body. We give that area breath and openings, and we work with it. So my firm belief, right, I'm a therapist, is that if you have those emotions, they need voice. Now, how much voice? Do we spend all day doing this? No, that's where we greet it after we've unpacked it. Sometimes I assign people a worry time. So I'm gonna greet you and I'm gonna notice you there and I'm gonna tell you that I'm gonna work on it at this point in the morning, and I'm gonna let my mind run wild with everything. I'm gonna pour it all out. And then at the end of it, I'm gonna do some breathing and I'm gonna close that up so I can go engage somewhere else. Then when you come back, I'm gonna say, hi, there you are, not till tomorrow. Does that answer the question? I don't know if I was too
Yes, it does.
general.
Yeah, it does. That really helps. I think it's good to just notice sometimes. I think one time I use this Bloom app. It's a cognitive behavioral therapy app in the mornings. And one of the things that they said on there, Dr. Mathew, is your thoughts are not yourself. So you recognize them and then you just realize you can unpack them and then deal with them later. So I think I resonate with that. So you don't want to avoid that anxiety, but what are some things that we should avoid during quarantine for the sake of our mental health?
So we should avoid overconsumption of the news. It doesn't matter who you are. There's no way that we are not absorbing that anxiety. And we should also pick what sources we want to get that information from. So sometimes it's like we jump from this site to this site and then it's conflicting. And then that raises that uncertainty because we're in uncertain times anyway. And so I think that becomes really, really hard, right? Because it just goes, then what do I believe and what can I trust? So if we can stick with whatever source you want to stick with, try to stick with a reputable source and then limit it. Limit it to 20 minutes a day or once a week, or depending on your level of anxiety and how much it's causing you distress, being really mindful of what you're absorbing. I think that the other piece to think about is social media, right? Research is showing more and more. We want social media so people can stay connected. Being connected during quarantine is incredibly important. As human beings, we need connection, and however we can do it safely or within our own boundaries, because that is what creates a sense of wellness. So I'm all about using Zoom and I think it's like Jackbox people are using, and Netflix watch parties, whatever it is that creates connection. But social media, that kind of scrolling, it makes people feel anxious and depressed. It doesn't leave people with warm fuzzies. And I think that right now we need a little bit more warm fuzzies. So that's something to be mindful of. Another piece I think that I've been telling people is be intentional with your time. Since we're home more, we have more time, right? We don't have our drive, our commute to work. For me, I'm not dropping my kid off at this or that. So there's more time. And almost that gives me a sense of aimlessness if I'm not careful. And that aimlessness makes the weeks and the days blend together. And then there's a sense of probably the quarantine fatigue that sets in. And so being purposeful with your time really is good for the brain. Thinking of something new that you can create. Creativity is excellent for the brain. Whether it's, art, I'm not artistic, that would not happen, but cooking, I like to cook. And so making new things I would not have had time for. So avoiding time that's totally without purpose, where the days blend. Netflix is great. Too much of it just makes you feel heavy. There's also this piece that I've been telling people is that we have something called, it's like an apnea, like when we watch videos, like I should probably take a breath now, and so should you. So there's a natural inclination. when we see videos, to hold our breath. So paying attention to your breathing, because we're on these calls or these meetings, at least me, this is how I'm doing my practice right now all day long. So paying attention to your breath. Having a routine helps people quite a bit. So avoiding not getting dressed. I know we can all be in our PJs and when you're working from home, or at least halfway, but it does something nice for the brain to actually start your day like the way you're supposed to start it, or whatever that looks like. So I think that's helpful. People are watching pandemic movies. I would suggest avoiding that.
Yeah, that can't be that helpful to.
No.
We've avoided the movie Contagion. No Day After Tomorrow or anything like that for the time being.
I mean, there's just like these things. I'm like, no, this is not the time. I know you think it's fine, but it's probably, and then it seeps into their dreams and I hear about it. And because it's just too close to reality right now, right? I mean, I haven't watched the movies because I stay away from things like that, but I've been hearing it clinically and I'm like, I need to add that to my list. Let us avoid high stimulus, threatening things that seem like what we're living in now. That's my 2 cents for that. I don't see it being that great for the brain.
That's a great tip.
So substance abuse, those are those things too. I should have said, I'm sorry. Any of your vices, whatever they are, whether it's eating, drinking, drugs, any of your vices, they are ripe to get worse right now. So you want to be on a high alert. Like I think that alcohol sales have like completely soared. Substance abuse hotlines, things like that have been really high. Any of your vices, you're going to fall prey to them possibly getting worse if we're not vigilant. I mean, people are calling it the COVID-15 rather than the freshman 15 and things like that, because the brain is seeking something either soothing or stimulus. So I would just add that in. Sorry, I cut you off, but I was like, oh,
No, you're good. So when you're talking about ways to soothe the brain, what comes to mind is like meditation or mindfulness. Those 2 words, I think they can get a little confusing sometimes. Could you maybe explain the difference between meditation and mindfulness?
Yeah, sure. So mindfulness, I always look at it is you can do anywhere. So you're being present to the current moment and you are engaged and trying to be present. So like for right now, I could say, name 3 colors that you see right now. And as you're looking at me on the screen, I could say, name 3 colors. I could say, as you're sitting, what's the texture of the chair you're sitting on? Pay attention to that. I could say, if you were eating something, what's it taste like in your mouth? Or how's your hat feeling on your head? And that would be engaging in mindfulness, because you're zooming in on the present moment and paying attention to it. Whereas meditation, you use mindfulness in meditation, but meditation is a practice. It's a structured practice, whether it's walking meditation. So you're using the components of it, but you are engaging in it. And then also I think mindfulness, I always think about it as like, I'm zooming in on the moment. And with meditation, I'm zooming in on my breath and trying to watch the rest of it kind of float past me. I don't think I described that all that well, but hopefully, I mean, I'm happy to clarify.
I think that makes sense to me, how those would be kind of interchangeable or brother and sister ways of looking at things. Mindfulness being the awareness and meditation being the practice of that awareness. Maybe is that a way to look at it?
You said it much better than me, and I've been practicing this and teaching it for 20 years. But it's what happens on a Saturday.
As many people do start to reflect inward, do you have any advice on how meditation and mindfulness can help us in our lives during the pandemic?
How much time do we have? It is my favorite thing probably to talk to people about in almost probably the 20 years I've been working clinically. I guess this upcoming year will be 19 years I've been practicing in some form clinically. I would say that mindfulness and meditation, especially cultivating a meditation practice, is the only magic pill I've seen that works for most people if they can engage. My favorite app for people to learn how to do it where it's tolerable, because even though it feels good for the body, we just resist. I've had a practice, I've been doing this, like I said, for this long, and I will resist my own meditation. When we're busy or we're not busy, there's just something about it that most people kind of swat away. Like we just don't naturally always move towards it. And so what I like is this app called Headspace. And if they were, and I believe this is ongoing, if you're like a medical provider, it's free for you right now. And I believe they're also lowering the cost, but the first 10 sessions are free. And it teaches people how to meditate. And he describes it, and it's only like 5 minutes and then 10 minutes. So people's brains can tolerate that process, and he walks you through it. And I find that my patients really respond well to the Headspace app. It's been one of my favorites to use. But that wasn't exactly your question, was it? You asked me how it can be used?
Wait. Well, just how it benefits us in quarantine, I guess, is a good way to look at what are some of the ways that those mindfulness and meditation are helpful.
Okay, yeah. So I went on to like, let's just start. Let's do this. And why is it helpful? Okay, so there was a huge Harvard happiness study. And what they did, I forget the amount of participants that they used, but it was a very large, like a mega study. And what they evaluated where people's brains were at. And what they found is that no matter where you were at, like even if you were not in quarantine, you were at like the most epic, life-changing, fun event of your life, that people's brains were either ahead, maybe thinking about what they were going to do next, or behind, thinking about what was behind. And what they found is that people are not happy. The people that were the most content, like 47%, I think, were either ahead or behind. And the people that were most content were the ones that were in the present moment. So what meditation teaches you is how to be engaged mindfully in the present moment. So there's this piece, right? It's like mindlessness. Have you ever like driven home and not realized you got home? Or
totally
opened up a candy
all the time,
bar and before you knew it, it was gone? That's like mindlessness. And there's something about that can be nice, but it's like brain chatter. It shows that it actually makes us not as well. We don't feel as content because it's mindlessness and there's all this chatter going on and we're not engaged. But when we're engaged, we just feel more aligned. We feel more well. And research is showing that. And so meditation has shown that it changes, big studies, fMRI studies, it changes your brain structures. It increases your attention, your focus, your ability to process emotion. It makes, if you're in therapy, it makes your brain really responsive to what you're trying to build and change. All of these Fortune 500 companies have started beginning like meetings with a little bit of meditation. Why? Because it increases productivity. It makes you smarter and better. If you're in quarantine, I would recommend it at any time. Clearly, I'm passionate about this topic because it gives you more sense of wellness and a control over your life, rather than 47% of people having to be ahead or behind. Can we be engaged in what we're doing so that we can be a little bit more well?
That makes so much sense right now too, when it's hard not to think about the past or the future, because we're either thinking about, man, it was so great when we could go out to restaurants and just drink a beer and say hi to your neighbor, or the future, like, what are we going to get back to going to restaurants and drinking beer and talking to our neighbors? And so, yeah, I can see how being present would be more helpful to kind of adapt to that situation. And something I've definitely tried to work on myself too.
It's always a process.
So do you have any like quick tips for mindfulness that you would want to share? Anything that would help people be in the present moment?
So kind of what I did with you, right? I said, name 3 colors, name 3 sensations, Anytime you find yourself super distracted, if you use your 5 senses, it's a fast way to re-engage. Also, our sense of smell is quite powerful. So if you're starting to feel kind of like agitated and just having an awful day, even if you have like your cup of coffee and you like the smell of coffee, just take a deep breath in. You hold for 4 and then blow out for at least 5 or 6. I prefer 4, 6. So you want your exhale to be longer than your inhale. And your hand needs to be, if you put your hand on your diaphragm, so on your stomach, and you take a deep breath in, your diaphragm needs to rise and fall. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then exhale. And so you're kind of pushing that exhale out. That's a way to engage. And if you're in a meeting and you'd want to be less obvious, so subtly you can engage and be mindful and give your body some breath. Like I said, I raved about Headspace. There's apps called Calm, that's free, Insight Timer that teaches it. I think that if you're eating, an easy one is to slow that down so that your brain gets the reward of that, whatever you're eating. So, and noticing, like sometimes when I give a big talk on mindfulness, I bring peppermints and I bring chocolate and I'm like, don't open the chocolate. Don't open the chocolate. Watch what your brain is doing. And people are already anticipating it and will pop that chocolate in your mouth and it's gone before your brain could even register and enjoy it. But if you try to eat something actually really slowly and notice the taste, the texture, the sensation, the temperature, it just, your body likes it. It feels better. That's an easy way to be mindful. If you stand outside and you look at the tree, you notice the leaves moving and you focus on all those kind of sensory type things. That's my favorite way to teach it and use it very easily. Lavender, if people like that oil, I say grab lavender spray or oil. It just brings things, it makes people feel more calm. But my favorite is probably sense of smell.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for those tips. I know I can't wait to kind of put those to practice. I'm going to play a little bit of I Spy with myself. Even just looking around, it makes right now, see an orange book and my glasses and feel the texture of things and the things that you pick these things in your life because you enjoy these aspects of them. You pick a certain pillow because the texture and the color. So maybe just taking some time to enjoy those things will give us all a little bit more presence.
Yes, that is the hope, and more wellness during this time.
So did you have anything else that you would like to maybe give advise our viewers about mental health during quarantine?
Yeah, I actually just for people to pay attention, there is a distress hotline. I didn't know if y'all wanted to include it in your links, just that, and so I'm happy to give it to you. I can say it out loud, but.
Oh yeah, say it out loud, that's great.
Okay, so there's a disaster distress hotline, and that's open 24/7, 365 days a year. It's 1-800-985-5990, and where people, if they're overwhelmed, they can reach someone. There's also probably a text feature. It says talk with us to 66746, and that can help, right? People are in, and it's free. And so it's accessible. And for people to be really paying attention to how they're feeling and to use this as a time to we're stuck, right? We're in a pandemic, and how do we come out of it investing in ourselves? So there's all the parts we're grieving, but how do we reclaim some of it? So maybe this is your time for radical self-care. Maybe it's your time to go, I never really needed therapy. I've been doing just fine, but hey, there's this thing that I've thought about. Maybe this is the time because you're home and you can access services. Those pieces, but for people to really be paying attention to their irritability, to their stress level, and being kind to themselves in it, and whether they're using a professional or needing those services. I just think I wanted to at least put that out there for people that are struggling and not knowing where to go.
Okay, well, thank you, Dr. Mathew. Is there, would you like me to share any of your contact information at the end of in the video and about your practice so people can reach out to you? Are you accepting clients?
I am currently pretty full, but that changes as people go on to maintenance. But I have a team of wonderful, super talented clinicians, and we all work very similarly. And what I think that is really important for us in our team is that if someone calls and we happen to be full, we give referrals to vetted sources, or we help connect them to someone who can help. So please do include our information. It's wellness360dallas.com. And for them to reach out, and people are always welcome to call me, and I will try to get them connected even if I can't fit someone in directly.
Okay, awesome. Well, we'll definitely get the information here for Wellness 360. And Dr. Mathew, it was great talking to you today and being able to share some information about the quarantine and how we can be more mentally healthy and how we can endure this. I think there's some great pearls of wisdom here just about being social, being more mindful, and staying away from the things that you know aren't good for you.
Yes.
So thank you for your time today, and thanks for everybody for viewing this uncomfortable conversation about mental health. It can be a little weird to talk about it, but we're in a time now where it is great to sit here and have some self-reflection and to be able to address things through hotlines or through your social circles. If the world's going to change, let's make it change for the better. Hi, I'm Nick Bridwell, the creative director of Uncomfortable Conversations. If you were impacted by this video and you think others could benefit from it, then we just ask that you please like and subscribe to our channel. That way we can bring you more content. Thank you so much for coming back to us, and we wish you the best.